The woman stumbled through the whiteout, her fingers numb and blue, unable to remember her own name, or how she had come to be wandering alone through the worst blizzard Wyoming had seen in 20 years. Snow pelted her face like frozen needles, and the wind howled with such fury that she could barely see 3 feet ahead. Her dress, torn and soaked through, offered no protection against the elements. She had no coat, no gloves, no memory of where she had been going or where she had come from. Everything before the cold was simply gone, as blank as the white landscape surrounding her. Her legs gave out beneath her, and she collapsed into a snowdrift, too exhausted to rise. The cold seeped deeper into her bones, and she felt herself beginning to fade. Perhaps this was how it would end, she thought distantly. Perhaps she would simply become part of this frozen wasteland, her forgotten past buried along with her body. Through the screaming wind, she heard something. A voice calling out. Strong hands gripped her shoulders and she felt herself being lifted. The world spun and then everything went dark. When consciousness returned, it came slowly, accompanied by warmth. Blessed, wonderful warmth. She became aware of crackling fire, the smell of wood smoke, and soft wool against her skin. Her eyes fluttered open to find herself in a small cabin, wrapped in heavy blankets near a stone fireplace. Her wet clothes had been replaced with a man's flannel shirt that hung past her knees. A figure moved in her peripheral vision, and she turned her head to see a man crouched by the fire, stirring something in a pot. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar, and several days' worth of stubble on his strong jaw. When he noticed she was awake, he turned to face her, revealing eyes the color of storm clouds. "You are awake," he said, his voice deep and steady. "How are you feeling?" She tried to speak, but her throat was raw. He quickly poured water from a pitcher into a tin cup and brought it to her, helping her sit up enough to drink. The water soothed her throat, and she managed to whisper, "Where am I?" "My cabin, about 5 miles north of Paradise, Wyoming. I found you in the snow. You are lucky I was checking my fence line before the storm got too bad, or you would have frozen to death." He studied her face carefully. "What is your name? What were you doing out there?" She opened her mouth to answer, but nothing came. She searched her mind desperately for any scrap of information, but there was only emptiness. Panic began to rise in her chest. "I do not know. I cannot remember. I cannot remember anything." The man's expression shifted from concern to something deeper. He sat down in the chair beside her makeshift bed. "Nothing at all, nothing," she whispered, tears beginning to stream down her face. "I do not know who I am, where I came from, why I was out there. It is all just gone." He reached out hesitantly, then gently placed his hand over hers. "It is all right. Do not panic. Sometimes people who suffer from exposure and head trauma lose their memories temporarily. It might come back with time." He squeezed her hand. "I am Kyle Barrett. This is my ranch, the Barrett homestead. You are safe here." She nodded, trying to calm her racing heart. Kyle Barrett. At least she had a name to hold on to, even if it was not her own. "Thank you for saving me." "Could not very well leave you to die," he said simply. He released her hand and stood. "I made some broth. You should eat something, build your strength back up. The blizzard is still raging outside. We will be snowed in for at least a few days." He brought her a bowl of warm broth, and she sipped it slowly, feeling the heat spread through her body. As she ate, she studied the cabin. It was modest but well built, with sturdy log walls and simple furnishings. A rifle hung above the door, and saddles and tack were arranged neatly along one wall. Everything spoke of a solitary life, carefully maintained. "You live here alone?" she asked. "I do now," Kyle replied, settling back into his chair. "My father built this place in 1862, right after the Homestead Act passed. He and my mother worked this land until they passed from fever 5 years ago. It has just been me since then. I am sorry for your loss." He nodded acknowledgement. "I keep the ranch going, raise cattle, break horses when I can get the work. It is a simple life but honest." He studied her again with those gray eyes. "We will need to call you something until you remember your name. Any preference?" She thought for a moment, searching for anything that felt familiar but came up empty. "I truly do not know." "Well, you have these unusual violet-colored eyes," he said. "Prettiest shade I have ever seen. What about Violet? We could call you Violet until we figure out who you really are." She considered this. Violet. It sounded pleasant enough, though it stirred no memories. "Violet," she repeated. "Yes, all right, Violet it is." Over the next 3 days the blizzard raged without mercy. Snow piled up against the cabin walls and the wind shrieked like a living thing. Kyle went out periodically to tend to his animals in the barn, always returning covered in snow and shaking with cold. Each time, Violet worried he would not make it back, but he always did, stamping the snow from his boots and thawing himself by the fire. During those long, snowbound days, they talked. Kyle told her about his life on the ranch, about growing up in Wyoming territory, about the hard winters and harder work. He spoke of his parents with quiet affection, of his father teaching him to rope cattle and his mother insisting he learn to read despite having no formal school nearby. "She made me read every night," he said, pulling a worn Bible and a handful of other books from a shelf. "Said no son of hers would grow up ignorant, even if we were living at the edge of civilization." Violet found herself drawn to his stories, to the glimpses they provided of a life rooted in place and purpose. Her own past remained frustratingly blank, but she began to notice small things about herself. She knew how to sew, she discovered, when Kyle needed a button replaced on his shirt. She could cook, which she realized when she took over preparing meals and found her hands moving with practiced confidence. "You make better biscuits than I do," Kyle admitted on the third evening, eating his fourth one. "Wherever you came from, someone taught you well." "I wish I knew who," she said softly, staring into the fire. "It is strange, knowing how to do things but not remembering learning them. Like my life is a story where someone tore out all the pages with the important parts." Kyle was quiet for a moment. "Maybe that is not such a bad thing. Maybe you get to write new pages now." She looked at him, surprised by the gentle wisdom in his words. In the firelight, his features seemed softer, less weathered. She found herself noticing details she had not before, the small scar above his left eyebrow, the way his eyes crinkled slightly when he smiled, the calluses on his hands from years of hard work. "You have been very kind to me," she said, "taking me in, caring for me." "You did not have to do all this." "Yes, I did," he replied simply. "It is what decent people do, help each other. Out here, we are all we have got." That night, after Kyle had settled onto his bedroll near the fire, giving her the only real bed in the cabin, Violet lay awake listening to the wind. Despite not knowing her past, she felt something stirring in her chest when she looked at this quiet cowboy who had saved her life. It frightened her, this feeling without context. How could she trust emotions when she did not even know who she was? On the fourth day, the blizzard finally broke. The wind died down, and pale sunlight struggled through the clouds. Kyle dug his way out of the cabin, creating a narrow path through snow that reached past his waist in places. The world had been transformed into a pristine white landscape, beautiful and deadly. "I need to get into town," Kyle said, stomping snow from his boots. "Let the sheriff know you are here, see if anyone has reported a woman missing. Maybe someone is looking for you." The thought filled Violet with mixed emotions. Part of her desperately wanted to know who she was, to fill the void in her mind. But another part, a part that was growing stronger each day, did not want this strange, peaceful interlude to end. "Can I come with you?" she asked. Kyle hesitated. "It is a hard ride and you are still recovering." "I feel fine now, strong, and I think I should be there. If someone knows me, I want to see their face." He nodded slowly. "All right. I have some of my mother's old clothes packed away. They might fit you well enough." The clothes he produced were simple but well made, a wool dress in deep blue and a heavy coat lined with fur. They fit reasonably well, though the previous owner had clearly been a bit shorter. Violet found herself wondering about Kyle's mother, about the woman who had insisted her son learn to read, who had made a home in this harsh landscape. They rode double on Kyle's big roan gelding, Violet sitting behind Kyle with her arms wrapped around his waist. The horse struggled through the deep snow, and the journey that normally took an hour stretched to 3. Violet was acutely aware of Kyle's warmth, of the solid strength of his back against her chest, of how safe she felt with her arms around him. Paradise was a small town, just a main street with a dozen buildings scattered along it. The general store, a saloon, a blacksmith, the sheriff's office, and a handful of others. Smoke rose from chimneys, and a few hardy souls were already digging out from the storm. Sheriff Thomas Brennan was a weathered man in his 50s with a gray mustache and suspicious eyes. He looked Violet over carefully as Kyle explained the situation. "Found her wandering in the blizzard, you say, and she cannot remember anything." The sheriff's tone suggested he found this convenient rather than tragic. "I am not lying," Violet said firmly, meeting his gaze. "I wish I could tell you who I am, but I cannot. Everything before Kyle found me is just blank." The sheriff grunted. "Well, nobody has reported anyone missing. Course, with this storm, we have been cut off from the rest of the territory for days. Might be a while before word travels." He made a note in a ledger. "You got a name. We have been calling her Violet," Kyle said, "on account of her eyes." "Violet, then." The sheriff wrote this down. "And she is staying with you at your place." "She is," Kyle said, his tone daring the sheriff to object. "That proper?" the sheriff asked, raising an eyebrow. "More proper than letting her freeze to death," Kyle shot back. "You got somewhere better for her to stay." The sheriff considered this. "Widow Hartley might take her in. She runs the boarding house." "I would prefer to stay with Kyle," Violet said quickly. The thought of being separated from him, of being among complete strangers, filled her with anxiety. At least Kyle felt safe. "If he is willing to let me stay." "I am," Kyle said without hesitation. The sheriff shrugged. "Your business, I suppose. I will send word to the surrounding towns, see if anyone knows of a missing woman. In the meantime, if you remember anything, you come tell me right away." They stopped at the general store to pick up supplies. The proprietor, a round-faced man named Mr. Chen who had come west during the railroad boom, was more sympathetic than the sheriff. "Memory loss, that is a terrible thing," he said, shaking his head. "But you are in good hands with Kyle here. Fine young man, always honest, always pays his debts on time." Kyle seemed embarrassed by the praise, quickly gathering flour, sugar, coffee, and other necessities. Violet noticed how people in the store watched them, curious and gossiping. A woman and a man traveling together, unmarried, would naturally cause talk. On the ride back, with the supplies packed in saddlebags, Violet felt the weight of those watching eyes. "People will talk," she said. "About me staying with you." "Let them talk," Kyle replied. "I know the truth, and so do you. That is what matters." But it did matter, Violet thought. Not for her own sake, perhaps, since she had no past to protect, but for Kyle. "I do not want to damage your reputation. My reputation is that I work hard and treat people fairly." Anyone who knows me knows I would not take advantage of a woman in trouble." He paused. "But if it bothers you, we can look into other arrangements." "No," she said quickly. "I do not want that. I feel safe with you." She felt him relax slightly. "Good, because I like having you there." The admission hung in the air between them, simple but weighted with meaning. Violet tightened her arms around him slightly, and she thought she felt him lean back into her embrace just a little. The days turned into weeks. The snow melted gradually, revealing the brown earth beneath. No word came from surrounding towns about a missing woman. It was as if Violet had appeared out of nowhere, with no past and no one looking for her. She settled into a routine at the ranch. She cooked, cleaned, mended Kyle's clothes, tended the small vegetable garden his mother had planted years ago. Kyle worked from dawn to dusk, repairing storm damage, caring for his cattle, breaking a young horse he had bought before winter. In the evenings they sat by the fire, talking or reading together. Violet found herself watching him more and more. The way he moved, all lean muscle and quiet competence. The way he spoke to his animals, gentle and patient. The rare smile that transformed his serious face. She caught him watching her too, his gray eyes following her movements around the cabin. One evening in early April, with spring finally asserting itself, Kyle came in from the barn to find Violet had made a special dinner. She had traded some eggs in town for beef, and she had roasted it with wild onions and the last of the stored potatoes. "What is the occasion?" he asked, washing up. "No occasion," she said, though that was not quite true. Today marked 2 months since he had found her. 2 months of living in this cabin, of sharing meals and conversations, of slowly building something she could not quite name. "I just wanted to make something nice." They ate together as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. After dinner, Kyle pulled out a harmonica and played a few simple tunes. Violet closed her eyes and let the music wash over her, feeling profoundly content in a way she suspected she had not felt in a long time, even if she could not remember. "You ever think about what your life was like before?" Kyle asked when he finished playing. "Sometimes," she admitted. "I wonder if I had family, if someone is missing me, but mostly I try not to think about it. It hurts too much, trying to remember and finding nothing." "What do you think about instead?" She looked at him directly. "This. Here, now. This life feels real to me in a way that nothing else does." He set down the harmonica and moved closer. "Violet, I need to tell you something." Her heart began to race. "What is it?" "These past 2 months, having you here, it has meant a lot to me, more than I expected." He struggled with the words, clearly uncomfortable with emotional declarations. "I know you do not know who you are, and maybe someday you will remember and you will want to leave. But until then, I want you to know that I care about you. A great deal." Violet felt tears prick her eyes. "I care about you too, Kyle, so much. You saved my life, but it is more than that. You make me feel like I belong somewhere, like I am not just lost." "You are not lost," he said softly, reaching up to cup her cheek. "You are right here." He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. She did not want to. When his lips met hers, it felt like coming home to a place she had never been. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, then deeper as she responded. His arms came around her, strong and sure, and she melted into his embrace. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Kyle rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that for weeks." "So have I," she whispered. "This is complicated," he said. "You do not know if you have a husband somewhere, a family." "I do not think I do," she said firmly. "I cannot explain it, but I do not feel like I belong to anyone else, and I know what I feel for you is real." "What do you feel?" She took a breath, gathering her courage. "I think I am falling in love with you." His gray eyes widened, then softened. "I know I am falling in love with you." He kissed her again, and this time there was no hesitation, no holding back. The kiss spoke of loneliness ended, of connection found, of two people choosing each other against all odds and reason. That night, Violet lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her lips still tingling from Kyle's kisses. They had agreed to take things slowly, to be cautious given the strange circumstances. But her heart was singing with a joy she had not known she was capable of feeling. As spring progressed, their relationship deepened. They were careful to maintain propriety, Kyle still sleeping by the fire while Violet took the bed. But they were no longer just two people sharing a cabin. They were courting in their own quiet way. Kyle taught her to ride properly, not just sitting behind him but controlling the horse herself. She proved to be a natural, and he gave her a gentle mare named Daisy to call her own. They rode together across the ranch, Kyle showing her every corner of his land. "My father always dreamed of expanding," he told her one afternoon as they sat on a ridge overlooking a green valley. "He wanted to build a bigger house, run more cattle, but then he and Ma died and I have just been trying to keep what we have." "Do you still have those dreams?" Violet asked. He was quiet for a moment. "I am starting to have new dreams about the future, about not being alone anymore." She knew what he meant. She was having the same dreams of a life built together, of children running around a bigger house, of growing old on this land. But the past would not stay buried forever. In late May, a stranger rode into paradise asking questions. He was a well-dressed man from Kansas City, a private detective named Harold Fisk. Someone had hired him to find a missing woman, and his inquiries had eventually led him to the story of a woman with no memory found during a blizzard in Wyoming. Sheriff Brennan sent word to Kyle and they rode into town together, Violet's stomach churning with dread and anticipation. Harold Fisk was waiting in the sheriff's office, a leather portfolio under his arm. He stood when they entered, his eyes immediately focusing on Violet. "Miss Vivienne Zimmerman," he said. The name hit her like a physical blow. Vivienne Zimmerman. Something flickered in her mind, a fragment of memory there and gone. "That is my name," she whispered. "It is," Fisk said. "You disappeared 3 months ago from a train traveling from Kansas City to Sacramento. You were traveling alone, running away from an arranged marriage your father had set up with a business associate. The train stopped briefly in southern Wyoming for repairs, and you vanished during that stop. Your father has been searching for you ever since." Vivienne sat down heavily. Memories were beginning to surface, painful and sharp. Her father's house in Kansas City, cold and ornate. A man named Richard Pemberton, 40 years old and cruel-eyed, whom her father expected her to marry. Her desperate plan to escape to California, where a cousin might take her in. The train stopping, her decision to step outside for air, wandering too far and becoming disoriented. "I remember," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I remember getting lost in the snow. I was trying to find my way back to the train, but it left without me. I kept walking, trying to find help until I could not walk anymore." Kyle's face had gone pale. "You were running away." "Yes," she said, looking at him desperately. "From a life I did not want, from a marriage that would have destroyed me." Fisk cleared his throat. "Your father is very anxious to have you return home, Miss Zimmerman. He has authorized me to escort you back to Kansas City." "No," Vivienne said immediately. "I am not going back." "Your father is worried about you," Fisk said. "He wants to make sure you are safe and cared for." "He wants to force me to marry a man I do not love," Vivienne countered. "That is not care, that is ownership. You are his daughter, you owe him obedience." "I owe myself a life worth living," she shot back. She turned to Kyle, taking his hand. I am not going back. I have built a life here. I have found something real. Kyle squeezed her hand, but his expression was troubled. Vivienne, I know it is complicated, she said quickly. I know everything has changed, but what we have, what we feel, that has not changed, has it? No, he said softly. That has not changed. Fisk looked between them, understanding dawning. I see. Well, Miss Zimmerman, you are of age, 22, according to your father's information. I cannot force you to return, but I will have to report to your father where you are and what you are doing. Tell him I am alive and well and happy, Vivienne said. Tell him I am not coming back, and he should not waste resources looking for me. After Fisk left, promising to send his report, Vivienne and Kyle sat in the sheriff's office in silence. Sheriff Brennan had tactfully stepped out, leaving them alone. Vivienne Zimmerman, Kyle said finally. It suits you better than Violet. I think I prefer Violet, she said. Vivienne was someone else, someone trapped and desperate. Violet is who I became here with you. Your father sounds like a powerful man. Rich, he is, and he does not like being defied. Kyle turned to face her fully. If you stay, he will probably come after you himself. There could be trouble, I know. You are giving up a life of wealth and comfort, for a life of meaning and love, she finished. Yes, I am, if you will have me. He pulled her close, holding her tight. I will have you, today, tomorrow, forever if you will let me. She clung to him, breathing in his familiar scent, feeling his heart beat against her cheek. Forever sounds perfect, but Kyle was right about the trouble. 3 weeks later, Marcus Zimmerman himself arrived in Paradise, accompanied by 2 large men who were clearly hired muscle rather than servants. Vivienne, who had been helping Kyle repair a fence when word came, rode back to the cabin to change into a proper dress. She needed to face her father as herself, fully remembered and fully committed to her choice. Marcus Zimmerman was a tall, imposing man with silver hair and cold blue eyes. He stood outside Kyle's cabin like he owned it, his face rigid with controlled anger. Vivienne, he said when she emerged. Enough of this foolishness. You are coming home. No, father, I am not, she said calmly. This is my home now. This hovel, he gestured dismissively at the cabin. You are throwing away your life, your future, for what? A cowboy who can barely scratch out a living. For a man who values me as a person, not as a bargaining chip, she replied. For a life I choose, not one you dictate. I am your father. I know what is best for you. You know what is best for your business interests, Vivienne countered. That is all you have ever cared about. Mother died trying to be what you wanted, and I will not make the same mistake. Marcus's face flushed with anger. How dare you speak to me this way? I have given you everything. You gave me money and things. You never gave me love or freedom or respect. She stood straighter, finding strength she did not know she possessed. I am not coming back. I am of legal age and you cannot force me. Cannot I? Marcus's eyes were dangerous. I could make life very difficult for your cowboy. A word in the right ears, some pressure on the bank that holds the note on this land. Kyle stepped forward, having come from the barn. You threatening me will not change her mind. It will just prove her right about you. Marcus looked at Kyle with contempt. And what can you offer her? Poverty. Hard labor, a rough life at the edge of nowhere. Love, Kyle said simply. Respect, a partnership. A life built together, not a prison dressed up with silk and jewels. Love, Marcus scoffed. Love does not put food on the table or a roof over your head. No, but hard work does, Kyle replied. And I am not afraid of hard work. Your daughter will never go hungry, never lack for shelter, never be mistreated. That is my promise. Your promise means nothing to me. It means everything to me, Vivienne said. She moved to stand beside Kyle, taking his hand. I love him, father. And he loves me. That is worth more than all your money and business deals. Marcus stared at his daughter for a long moment. "If you do this, if you stay here, you are no longer my daughter. I will cut you off completely. No inheritance, no help, nothing." "I understand," Vivienne said, though the words hurt more than she expected. Despite everything, some part of her had hoped he might choose her over his pride. "You will regret this," Marcus said coldly. "When the reality of this life hits you, when the romance wears off and you are left with nothing but hardship, you will regret this choice. The only thing I regret is that you cannot see me as anything more than property," Vivienne said. "Goodbye, father." Marcus turned on his heel and stalked to his horse, his hired men following. He mounted and looked back one more time. "You are making a mistake, Vivienne." "No," she said softly as he rode away. "I am making a choice." After he was gone, Vivienne collapsed against Kyle, shaking. He held her as she cried, for the father who could not love her properly, for the family she had lost, for the complicated tangle of relief and grief. "I am sorry," Kyle murmured against her hair. "I know that was hard." "It was," she admitted, "but I do not regret it. I meant what I said. This life with you, it is what I want." "You are sure, because it will be hard. We do not have much, and some years we will have even less." She pulled back to look at him. "I have never been more sure of anything. When I had no memory, I fell in love with you not knowing who I was or what I came from. That love was pure and real. Now I know exactly what I am choosing, and I choose you. I choose this life." He kissed her then, deep and long, and when they pulled apart, he dropped to one knee right there in the mud. "I do not have a ring yet," he said, "but I will get you one, the nicest one I can afford. Vivienne Zimmerman, will you marry me? Will you be my wife, my partner, build this life with me?" "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, absolutely yes." They were married a week later in Paradise's small church. The ceremony was simple, attended by the few people Kyle knew in town and a handful of curious locals. Vivienne wore a simple white dress she had sewn herself, and Kyle wore his best shirt and a string tie. The preacher, Reverend Matthews, smiled at them kindly. "Marriage is a sacred bond," he said. "It is about choosing each other every day, in good times and bad, in wealth and poverty, in sickness and health. Do you both understand this?" "We do," they said together. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, and Kyle kissed his bride, Vivienne felt a completeness she had never known. This was what love felt like. Not the arranged marriages of convenience her father had tried to force on her, but real love, built on respect and partnership and genuine affection. The first year of marriage was everything Marcus had warned about and nothing like he had predicted. It was hard work, yes. Vivienne learned to milk cows, tend chickens, help with calving season, preserve food for winter. Her hands, once soft and manicured, became calloused and strong, but it was also filled with joy. Waking up beside Kyle each morning, learning to work together to anticipate each other's needs. Long evenings talking by the fire, making love in their marriage bed, discovering each other with tenderness and passion. Money was tight. There were months when Vivienne wondered if they would make it, when the cattle prices dropped or when illness struck the herd. But they always found a way, through hard work and careful planning and sheer determination. In their second year of marriage, Vivienne became pregnant. She was terrified and thrilled in equal measure. Kyle was overjoyed, already planning additions to the cabin to make room for their growing family. "We need another bedroom," he said, sketching plans on paper one evening. "And we should enlarge the kitchen, maybe add a proper porch." "Can we afford all that?" Vivienne asked, though she loved his enthusiasm. "We will make it work," he said confidently. "I have been talking to some of the other ranchers. They need experienced hands during roundup. I can hire out for a few weeks, bring in extra money." "I do not want you gone that long," she protested. He came to sit beside her, placing his hand on her still flat stomach. "It is for our family. For our future. I will be back before you know it." The pregnancy progressed well. Vivienne bloomed with health, her body taking to motherhood naturally. The women in paradise, initially standoffish toward the outsider, warmed to her as they saw her commitment to her marriage and her community. They brought her advice and hand-me-down baby clothes, sharing their own experiences. In late February of 1879, on a bitterly cold night, Vivienne went into labor. Kyle rode frantically to fetch the midwife, Mrs. O'Brien, who arrived with her bag of supplies and her calm, capable manner. "First babies take their time," Mrs. O'Brien said. "Settle in, Kyle. It will be a long night." It was. Vivienne labored through the night and into the next day, Kyle holding her hand and wiping her forehead, feeling helpless and awed by her strength. Finally, as the sun was setting again, their son was born, wailing lustily and perfect. "A boy," Mrs. O'Brien announced, placing the cleaned and wrapped baby in Vivienne's arms. "A healthy, strong boy." Vivienne looked down at her son, at his tiny face and dark hair, and felt her heart expand beyond what she thought possible. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "We have been waiting for you." Kyle touched his son's tiny hand with one finger, his eyes wet. "He is perfect. You are perfect." They named him Kenneth William Barrett. Kenneth for Kyle's father and William for Vivienne's late grandfather, one of the few members of her family she had truly loved. Kenneth was a good baby, content and healthy. Watching Kyle with their son was a revelation for Vivienne. He was so gentle, so patient, singing old cowboy songs to lull Kenneth to sleep, talking to him about the ranch and the horses as if the baby could understand every word. "You are a wonderful father," Vivienne told him one night as he rocked Kenneth. "I had a good example," Kyle replied. "My father, he always had time for me even when the work was endless. I want to be that for Kenneth, for all our children." "All," Vivienne teased. "How many are you planning?" "As many as you are willing to give me," he said with a grin. "I always wanted a big family." 2 years later, Vivienne gave birth to twin girls, whom they named Emma Grace and Sarah Rose. The cabin Kyle had expanded was suddenly bursting with life and noise and chaos. Those years were the hardest Vivienne had ever known, but also the happiest. She was constantly exhausted, caring for 3 small children while also helping run the ranch. But she was also surrounded by love. Kyle's love, her children's love, the community they had built. The ranch prospered slowly but steadily. Kyle's reputation for honesty and hard work brought him more opportunities. He began buying additional land when he could afford it, expanding their herd. Vivienne sold eggs and butter in town, and her vegetables became known for their quality. On their 5th anniversary, Kyle surprised her with a ring, a simple gold band with a small sapphire. "It is not much," he said as he slipped it onto her finger, "but I wanted you to have something, even if it took me 5 years to afford it." "It is perfect," Vivienne said, admiring how the blue stone caught the light. "But you did not need to do this." "Yes, I did. You gave up everything for me. The least I can do is give you a proper wedding ring." She cupped his face in her hands. "I did not give up anything. I gained everything that matters. You, our children, this life. I am happier than I ever imagined possible. Even with the hard work, the money struggles, the isolation, especially with all that," she said. "Because we face it together. That is what makes it worthwhile." When Kenneth was 7, old enough to help with small chores, Vivienne started teaching him to read and write, just as Kyle's mother had taught Kyle. She set up a small school corner in the cabin, and soon Emma and Sarah were joining in, eager to learn their letters. "You are a good teacher," Kyle observed, watching her patiently sound out words with Sarah. "Your mother had the right idea," Vivienne said. "Education matters even out here, especially out here." By the time their children were 8, 6, and 6, the ranch was doing well enough that they could afford to hire a hand to help with the work. They hired a young man named Tom Parker, fresh from Kansas and eager to learn the ranching business. With an extra set of hands, Kyle had more time to spend with his family. He taught Kenneth to ride and rope, showing the same patience his father had shown him. He played tea party with the twins, sitting on the floor of their bedroom with a tiny cup in his large, work-roughened hands. One evening in the summer of 1886, after the children were asleep, Vivienne and Kyle sat on the porch they had finally built, watching the sun set over their land. "You ever think about what your life would have been like if you had married that man your father chose?" Kyle asked. "Sometimes," Vivienne admitted. "I think about the big house I would have lived in, the servants, the social events, the complete and utter emptiness of it all. No regrets. Not a single one." She leaned against him. "You showed me what love feels like. Real love, the kind that is built every day through shared work and shared dreams. That is worth more than all the wealth in the world." "I showed you." Kyle shook his head. "You are the one who taught me. Before you, I thought I would spend my life alone, just me and the ranch. You brought light and laughter and life to this place. You made it a home instead of just a house." They sat in comfortable silence, hands intertwined, watching the stars emerge. After all these years, Vivienne sometimes still marveled at the path her life had taken. If that blizzard had not stranded her, if Kyle had not found her, she would have likely died in the snow. Or if she had survived, she would have eventually made it to California, to her cousin's house, to a life of genteel poverty and eternal gratitude. Instead, she had this: a man who loved her unconditionally, children who filled their home with joy, a community that respected her, work that mattered, a life that was entirely her own. "What are you thinking?" Kyle asked, noticing her smile. "That I am glad I got lost in that blizzard," she said. "Glad you found me. Glad for every single day since then." He kissed her temple. "So am I. Best day of my life, finding you in that snow." The years continued to pass, each one adding new layers to their life together. Kenneth grew into a serious, responsible young man, clearly destined to take over the ranch someday. Emma proved to be a gifted artist, always sketching the landscape and animals around her. Sarah inherited her mother's love of books and learning. In 1890, Vivienne gave birth to one more child, another son they named Daniel Marcus. The middle name was Vivienne's choice, a gesture toward reconciliation with the father who had never contacted her again after that confrontation years ago. "Are you sure?" Kyle asked when she suggested it. "I am sure," Vivienne said. "He is still my father, even if we are estranged. And maybe someday Daniel will want to know about his grandfather. This way, he is not erased from our family history." 2 years after Daniel's birth, word reached them that Marcus Zimmerman had died of heart failure. Vivienne received a letter from her father's lawyer, informing her that despite his threats to disinherit her, Marcus had left her a small portion of his estate in his will. "It is not much compared to what he left his business partners," the lawyer wrote, "but it is something. Perhaps his way of acknowledging you in the end." The money was enough to make significant improvements to the ranch, to build the larger house Kyle had always dreamed of, to secure their children's futures. But more than the money, the gesture itself meant something to Vivienne. Her father had not forgotten her. In his own way, he had acknowledged that she had been right to choose her own path. They built the new house on a hill overlooking the original cabin, which they kept as a reminder of where they had started. It was a fine house. 2 stories with a wrap-around porch and large windows that let in the Wyoming sun. On the day they moved in, Vivienne stood in the empty living room and thought about the girl she had been, fleeing an arranged marriage with no plan beyond escape. That girl could never have imagined this life, this happiness. "What do you think?" Kyle asked, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "I think it is perfect," she said, leaning back against him. "Our home." "Our home," he agreed, "built by us for us and our family." Kenneth took over more of the ranch operations as he got older, proving to have his father's skill and dedication. At 19, he married a local girl named Catherine Walsh, and they built their own small house on the far edge of the Barrett property. Emma, at 17, was courted by a young man from Cheyenne who appreciated her artistic talents. Sarah, also 17, announced her intention to become a teacher, following in her mother's footsteps. Daniel, meanwhile, was growing into a bright, curious 10-year-old who asked endless questions about everything. "Will you tell me about Grandfather Zimmerman?" he asked Vivienne one day. She had known this question would come eventually. "What do you want to know?" Was he really as mean as Kenneth says? Vivienne chose her words carefully. He was not mean. He was rigid and controlling. He believed he knew what was best for everyone and expected absolute obedience. We could not find a way to understand each other. But you named me after him. I did. Because despite our differences, he was still my father. And because I wanted you to know that even difficult relationships are part of our story. They shape us, even if we choose to walk a different path. Daniel considered this. "I am glad you walked a different path. Otherwise we would not be here." "So am I, sweetheart. So am I." On Vivienne and Kyle's 20th anniversary, their children organized a celebration. Friends and neighbors came from all over, filling the new house with laughter and music. There was dancing and food and toasts to the happy couple. 20 years, Kyle said in his brief speech, standing with his arm around Vivienne. 20 years since I found this woman wandering in a blizzard, with no memory and no name. I could not have known then that saving her life would mean she would save mine too. She brought love and purpose to my days. She gave me a family, a real home. She is my partner in every sense of the word. And he showed me what it means to be truly loved, Vivienne added. Not for what I could provide or who my family was, but for who I am. He saw me when I could not even see myself. These 20 years have been the greatest gift. They danced together as their children and friends watched, moving to a waltz played on fiddle and piano. Vivienne closed her eyes and let herself be transported back to that cabin, to those early days when they were just beginning to discover each other. "What are you thinking about?" Kyle whispered. "How far we have come," she said, "and how grateful I am for every step of the journey." As they grew older, Kyle and Vivienne settled into a comfortable rhythm. Kenneth and Catherine had given them 3 grandchildren, with another on the way. Emma had married her artist suitor and moved to Cheyenne, though she visited often. Sarah had indeed become a teacher, running the school in Paradise. Daniel was preparing to attend university in Laramie, the first Barrett to pursue higher education. The ranch continued to thrive under Kenneth's management, allowing Kyle and Vivienne to step back somewhat from the daily operations. They spent their time enjoying their grandchildren, maintaining the large garden Vivienne had always loved, and simply being together. On a spring evening in 1904, exactly 25 years after the blizzard that had brought them together, Vivienne and Kyle sat on their porch watching the sunset. They were both in their 50s now, their hair streaked with silver, their faces lined by years of sun and wind and laughter. "Quarter of a century," Vivienne mused. "It feels like no time at all and like forever, both at once. Do you remember when you could not remember anything?" Kyle asked with a slight smile. I remember everything now, she said. My childhood, my father's house, running away, but those memories feel like they belong to someone else. The life that feels real, the one that matters, started the day you found me in the snow. You know what I think? Kyle said. I think losing your memory was a gift. It let you become who you were always meant to be without the weight of expectations and obligations holding you back. Vivienne considered this. Maybe you are right. Vivienne Zimmerman was trapped by duty and fear. But Violet, the woman with no past, she was free to choose her own future, and she chose you. We chose each other, Kyle corrected. We did, Vivienne agreed. And I would choose you again every single day for the rest of my life. He took her hand, his calloused fingers intertwining with hers in a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. I love you, Vivienne Barrett. I have loved you since the moment I saw those violet eyes open in my cabin, looking at me with such trust despite having no idea who I was. And I love you, Kyle Barrett. You saved my life in that blizzard, but more than that, you gave me a life worth saving. You showed me that love is not about grand gestures or wealth or status. It is about choosing to build something together, day by day, choice by choice. They sat in peaceful silence as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. Around them, the ranch hummed with the quiet sounds of evening, cattle lowing in the distance, chickens settling for the night, the murmur of Kenneth and Catherine's voices as they put their children to bed in their own house nearby. This was the life Vivienne had chosen when she chose to stay in Wyoming rather than return to her father. This was the love Kyle had offered when he opened his home and heart to a stranger. It was not perfect, had never been perfect, but it was real and true and theirs. Do you think our grandchildren will understand? Vivienne asked. When we tell them the story of how we met, will they understand how extraordinary it was? I think they will understand that sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead to the best things in our lives, Kyle said. You got lost in a blizzard and lost your memory. That should have been a tragedy, but it became the beginning of everything good. Vivienne nodded. That was it exactly. The blizzard that should have killed her had instead brought her to Kyle. The memory loss that should have been devastating had freed her from a past she never wanted. The hard life of a rancher's wife that should have broken her had instead made her stronger than she ever imagined. I want to go back to the cabin tomorrow, she said suddenly. The original one. Walk through it, remember. We can do that, Kyle agreed. Though I am not sure how much there is to see, we have been using it mostly for storage. The next morning, they walked hand in hand down the hill to the small cabin where their story had begun. It looked even smaller now, compared to the house they lived in, but it was still solid and well-maintained. Kyle opened the door, and they stepped inside. Dust motes danced in the sunlight streaming through the windows. The stone fireplace where Vivienne had first regained consciousness still stood, though no fire burned there now. The bed where she had recovered was pushed against the far wall, covered with a sheet. I was lying right there, Vivienne said, pointing. And you were sitting in that chair, watching over me. I thought you were the most beautiful woman I had ever seen, Kyle said, even half frozen and unconscious. And I woke up to find the man who would become my whole world. They explored the cabin together, touching familiar objects, remembering moments. The table where they had shared their first meal. The shelf that had held Kyle's mother's books, which now resided in their new house. The corner where they had stood when they first kissed. We should keep this place maintained, Vivienne said. Not just as storage, but as a reminder. Maybe someday our grandchildren or great-grandchildren will want to see where it all began. That is a good idea, Kyle agreed. We could fix it up, make it livable again. A guest house, maybe. Over the following months, they did exactly that. With Kenneth's help, they repaired and refreshed the cabin, turning it back into the cozy space it had been. They furnished it simply but comfortably, making it a place where visiting family could stay, or where they themselves could retreat when they wanted quiet. On the anniversary of the day Kyle had found Vivienne, they spent the night in the cabin, cooking a simple meal over the fireplace and sleeping in the narrow bed just as they had in those early days, though now they were allowed to share it. "This feels like going back in time," Vivienne said, curled against Kyle's side in the small bed. "Except we are older and creakier," Kyle joked. "Older and wiser," Vivienne corrected. "And more grateful for what we have." The years continued their steady march. Kenneth and Catherine's children grew and began families of their own. Emma became a renowned regional artist, her paintings of Wyoming landscapes hanging in galleries across the West. Sarah married a fellow teacher and had 2 children. Daniel completed university and returned to Paradise to practice law, becoming the town's first resident attorney. Vivienne and Kyle watched it all with pride and joy, their family tree growing and branching in ways they could never have predicted. Every child, grandchild, and great-grandchild was a testament to the choice they had made, to the love they had built. In their later years, they spent more and more time simply enjoying each other's company. They would sit on the porch for hours, talking or reading or just watching the world go by. Their love, which had begun with such dramatic circumstances, had mellowed into something deep and unshakable. "If you could go back," Kyle asked her one day when they were both in their 70s, "knowing everything that would happen, would you still get on that train, still run away?" Vivienne did not hesitate. "Yes. Every hardship, every struggle, it all led me to you, to this life. I would not change a single moment, not even the blizzard, the memory loss, especially not those," she said firmly. "The blizzard brought me to you. The memory loss let me see you clearly, without prejudice or preconception. It was all necessary." Kyle pulled her close, marveling as he always did that this remarkable woman had chosen him. A simple cowboy, a man of the land, nothing special by the world's standards. But to her, he had been everything, just as she had been everything to him. When Vivienne was 78, she fell ill with pneumonia. Despite the best care available, her body, weakened by age, struggled to fight the infection. Kyle sat by her bedside day and night, holding her hand, refusing to leave. "You have to promise me something," she said weakly one evening. "Anything," Kyle said, his voice rough with emotion. "Promise me you will keep living. Keep enjoying the ranch, the family, all the things we built together. Do not just give up when I am gone." "You are not going anywhere," he insisted, though he knew it was not true. "Kyle." She squeezed his hand with what little strength she had. "Promise me." "I promise," he said, tears streaming down his weathered face, "but I do not know how to live without you. The same way you lived before you found me, one day at a time, and I will be with you always. In the land we worked together, the children we raised, the love we shared, that does not end just because I am gone." She rallied for a few more days, long enough to say goodbye to each of their children and grandchildren, to speak her love one more time to the family she had helped create. Then, on a quiet spring morning very much like the morning Kyle had first found her in the snow, Vivienne Barrett passed away peacefully, surrounded by love. Kyle was devastated. For 50 years, she had been his partner, his love, his reason for waking up each day. The world seemed impossibly empty without her. But he had made her a promise, and Kyle Barrett was a man who kept his promises. He continued working the ranch, though Kenneth handled most of the operations. He spent time with his grandchildren and great-grandchildren, telling them stories of their remarkable grandmother. He maintained both houses, keeping everything just as Vivienne would have wanted. On the anniversary of the day he had found her, he would walk down to the cabin and spend the day there, remembering. He could still see her so clearly, the way she had looked waking up in his bed, confused and afraid, the way her violet eyes had lit up when she smiled, the way she had felt in his arms. 3 years after Vivienne's death, on a cold winter morning, Kyle Barrett died peacefully in his sleep. He was 84 years old. His children found him in the chair by the fire, a small smile on his face, as if he had seen something wonderful just before the end. They buried him next to Vivienne on the hill overlooking the ranch, under a shared headstone that reads simply, Kyle Barrett and Vivienne Barrett. Partners in life, together in eternity. The ranch stayed in the Barrett family, passed down through generations. The cabin where it all began was preserved carefully, becoming a cherished piece of family history. Children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren heard the story of the blizzard, the woman with no memory, and the cowboy who taught her what love felt like. It became a family legend, the kind of love story people told at weddings and anniversaries, a reminder that sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead us exactly where we are meant to be. That love, real love, is built through choices made every day. That two people who choose each other, who commit to building a life together despite obstacles and hardships, can create something that lasts beyond their own lifetimes. The story of Kyle and Vivienne Barrett lived on, a testament to the power of love found in the most unlikely circumstances, in the harsh beauty of the Wyoming wilderness, in a small cabin during a blizzard that changed everything. Their legacy was not just the successful ranch or the large family, though those were significant. Their true legacy was the example they set, of choosing love over duty, of building something real and lasting through hard work and dedication, of two souls finding each other against all odds and creating a life that mattered. In the end, that was what Vivienne had learned when she lost her memory, and Kyle helped her remember what love feels like. It was not about grand gestures or perfect moments. It was about everyday choices, about showing up for each other, about building a life together one day, one decision, one act of love at a time. And it was about trust. Vivienne had trusted Kyle when she had no reason to, when she could not even remember her own name. That trust had been rewarded 1,000 times over, in 50 years of partnership and devotion. Their story proved that sometimes losing everything can lead to finding what truly matters. That being stranded, whether by a blizzard or circumstances beyond our control, can be the beginning of something beautiful. That love, when it is real and true, can overcome any obstacle and create a legacy that lasts for generations. The Barrett family never forgot this. They told the story to each new generation, keeping alive the memory of how it all began. In that telling, Kyle and Vivienne lived on, their love as fresh and powerful as it had been in that small cabin all those years ago when a cowboy saved a woman's life, and she saved his right back. And together, they built something extraordinary out of nothing but faith, hard work, and love.